Question number 8, Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and kia ora koutou te whare. My question goes to the Minister of Finance and asks, does he agree with the Economist that, quote, inequality is one of the biggest social, economic and political challenges of our time, close quote? And if so, what is his government doing to address the fact that New Zealand now has the widest income gap since detailed records began?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, I haven't seen the Economist piece, so I can't comment on that. But I can tell the member that her assertion about the situation in New Zealand is wrong. The widest gap between incomes in New Zealand actually occurred in the mid-2000s and peaked in 2004. Incomes were more unequal in the mid-2000s than they are today.
Order.
And more unequal than they were in the 1990s. That information is from the most recently available MSD Incomes report, which also shows that income inequality in New Zealand is close to the OECD median, similar to Australia, Ireland and Canada, and that redistribution through transfers, which we have maintained, like benefits, working for families and accommodation subsidies, reduce inequality significantly.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Can he confirm that despite his claim that New Zealanders are better off, in the last year 44% of people's incomes did not increase, but the cost of living continued to rise?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, surveys of the labour force have always shown that in any given year a proportion of the workforce does not receive a wage increase. Given that we have been in a period of relatively high unemployment and emerging from a recession, it's not a surprise that a proportion of the workforce did not receive a pay increase. However, over time, disposable incomes in New Zealand have risen consistently each year, and that is unusual among developed countries.
Supplementary
question, Jacinda Ardern.
Based on that answer, is the Minister saying that the 80% of Kiwis who, when recently surveyed, said that they were either no better off or were worse off than 2 years ago, are in fact wrong about their own circumstances?
That was just members of the Labour Party.
Look, Mr.
Honourable
Speaker,
Bill English.
Mr Speaker, it is almost always the case that New Zealand households feel the pressure of constrained budgets. Whether they get pay rises or don't, it never feels like a lot more than the expenditure. However, the facts are reasonably clear, and that is, on average, disposable incomes have risen moderately in the last 4 or 5 years. And the factors behind that are pretty well understood. The lowest interest rates in 50 years and the highest purchasing power of the New Zealand dollar in 30 or 40 years. And that has helped to sustain household incomes through a period where, across most of the developed world, household incomes have dropped.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Does he agree with the IMF that inequality limits growth by denying low-income families the money they need to invest in their children's future, and by allowing top-income earners to influence politicians to pass laws that favour their interests, not the wider economy?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Bill English.
Yes, I do, and that's why the opposition should be supporting 2 particular government policies. First, the implementation of national standards in our schools to ensure that every young New Zealander gets the proper rewards of a public education system, and that is the social mobility that goes with educational achievement. And Labour Party should also be supporting our changes to ensure a greater supply of housing, particularly in the Auckland market, because planning rules there reinforce the wealth of those who already own expensive houses and lock out those who want access to the housing market. I look forward to support from Labour on both of those policies to prove their integrity on these issues.
Supplementary Minister.
question, Jacinda Ardern.
How does national standards or RMA reforms help the 63-year-old woman who cleans the Prime Minister's office and is still on just $14.60 an hour after 19 years of cleaning at Parliament?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, in the ways that I outlined, so that to ensure that her children or grandchildren actually get the social mobility that a public education system promises them. And I hope that the Labor Party doesn't agree with the teacher unions that her grandchildren can't learn because they're poor and schools can't do anything about it. But I understand that is the Labor Party position, that if you are the grandchild of the cleaner of the Prime Minister's office, then you probably can't achieve because it's the family's fault and not the school's fault.
Question number 9, Paul Foster-Bell.
Tanakwe, Mr Speaker.
Tanakwe.
My question is to the